So I just wanted to show you something really cool in Romans chapter 12. I have here, as you can see, this is chapter 12, verse 9 and verse 21. And here's all the stuff in between, which I'll look at in just a moment. But he begins this section, obviously, here in verse 9, and he closes it out with what he says down in verse 21. And these are related. These bookends are saying the same basic thing, as you can see just by looking at it. Let love be genuine, abhor what is evil, hold fast to what is good. And so you have the idea that there's something evil and there's something good. Then down here, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. So these are it's the same kind of statement, but they say something unique. They say something different. In verse 9, he says to abhor what is evil. This word, abhor, obviously it means to hate or to despise or to have a vehement disdain, a vehement hatred for something. It's one of the strongest kinds of hatred that can exist. And that should be our disposition toward evil. And then he says, hold fast to what is good. The idea of holding fast, this word, your version might say, cling to it. Cling to you're holding on to it tightly. You're gripping to it. And that's interesting because you here in verse 9, you have this idea, something that you hate, namely evil, which what he's saying is this is the enemy. You hate it. You despise it. But you're clinging tightly to what is good. Now, down in verse 21, notice how he says, do not be overcome by evil. The word for overcome, just write this out, is the Greek word nikao. That's the verb, but you might recognize this, Nike, which, think about our shoe company, Nike. It means victory. Well, this word nikao means to conquer or to be victorious over something, to overcome it, to defeat it. So that's the idea. So in verse 9, you get the idea there's an enemy, namely that which is evil. And down in verse 21, it's trying to defeat you. Evil is trying to defeat you. But he says, here's the same word again, overcome. You will overcome evil with good. You will conquer evil with good. Evil is the enemy, and the way to conquer it, the way to overcome it, is with good. Now, just think about that for a moment. In verse 9, what does he say you're doing with good? It's not just a sentiment. It's not just, this idea that you kind of hold up in the clouds, but he says you are holding on to it. You are clinging to it. You are gripping what is good. And down in verse 21, you are conquering evil with good. So what's the idea? The idea that you should have in your mind, if I can just do a crude little drawing here, is that there's some kind of there's a sword you're holding, there's a weapon that you're holding, and it's that which is good. And you look out in the world and you see evil, you see wickedness, you see you see what's happening in just in our culture. You look at the evil in your own family. You look at the pride that you see in your own heart. Look at the way that you interact with your husband or with your wife, the way that you treat your kids. You look at the bitterness and the clamoring and the divisions that are in your own heart. And we see evil all over the place. What do we do about it? Do we just argue about it on Facebook? How do we overcome it? How do we conquer it in ourselves first, in our communities second, and then in the world third? How do we do it? Well, We do it with good. We are holding on to good as our weapon, and then we're slaying evil by means of it. Now, if verse 9 and verse 21 are the bookends, and both of them have to do with overcoming evil with good, you're gripping good and you're hating evil, you're conquering evil with this good that you're gripping, then it's very strongly implied and very obviously the case that everything between these verses, see, everything between verses 9 and 21 is how to do that. And so let's just briefly look at this. Love one another. See, that's good. Love one another with brotherly affection. This is talking about within the church. Outdo one another. Outdo one another in showing honor. So I want to show more honor to you than you show to me. Do not be slothful in zeal. Don't be that word here. This is, see if I can remember exactly how to write it out in Greek, but it's oniros. Well, we get onerous. You've probably heard that word in English. It means to be weighed down or burdened or sluggish. Well, don't be weighed down in zeal. Be fervent in spirit. You shouldn't be tepid. You should be be spiritually on fire, and that's a good thing. Serve the Lord. Everything we do is for the Lord. That's a good thing. When you wake up and you go to work, I'm not working for my boss. If I was, I probably wouldn't have a good attitude, but I'm serving the Lord. Rejoice in hope. See, Christians have hope. We ought to rejoice in it. Be patient in tribulation. Why? Because we have hope. These are good things. Be constant in prayer. Prayer is a weapon. It's a good weapon for slaying the evil and the idolatry and the lust in my own heart, and for even for asking God to defeat it and conquer it in the world. Contribute to the needs of the saints. So you're giving to someone outside of yourself. Seek to show hospitality. The idea of opening up your home and having people in and feeding them a good meal. Well, that's good. How do we overcome evil? We overcome evil with good. Bless those who persecute you. This is interesting. You think about we hate evil, right? Well, there are those that hate you. And so what are they doing? They're persecuting you. What do? Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them. And that relates down in verse 18 when he says, live peaceably with everybody. Never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God. For it's written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. But our duty, he says, if we truly hate evil, then we're going to be doing the good of loving our enemies, of repaying no one evil for evil, of doing what is honorable in the sight of all. We're going to, if our enemy's hungry, we're going to feed him. And how do you overcome evil? Well, you feed the person that hates you. And, if he's thirsty, you give something to him to drink. And these aren't just little silly sentiments, because notice he says in verse 20, for by so doing, you will heap burning coals on his head. This is not just this fanciful thing that, hey, you do something good to him, he's going to like you, he's going to love you. No, but what you're doing is he's going to have no excuse in the judgment. You're heaping burning coals on his head. That's not this proverb here, you'll heap burning coals on his head. That's not a pretty idea. That's not a good thing. That's a bad thing. And it has to do with God right here in verse 19 having his wrath. God's going to take care of it all. But our job right now, our means of overcoming evil is with good. That's how Jesus did it. He overcame evil with good on the cross. And, that's folly to man. But the wisdom of God is stronger than, the wisdom of God looks foolish, But the foolishness of God is wiser than the wisdom of men. And, the weakness of God looks weak, but the weakness of God is stronger than the strength of men. And so my challenge and call in this text says we ought to overcome evil with good. And just give yourself some study to Romans 12:10 to 18 or 10 to 20 to learn how to better do that. I hope you have